Almost ready. Wow, this is slow.
Mine says live on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, mine
This
does.
is setting up done. Okay. Okay, so let me go back. This technology is above my ability to understand.
Mine says meeting is now streaming live, so.
Okay. All right. So, roll call. Mr. Martinez.
Present.
Mr. Martelli.
Here.
Ms. Nichols. We
Here.
have a quorum.
Excellent. Let's stand up for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, or the Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. As with these meetings, the agenda today is to work with colleagues to try to find tools for our bigger committee to be more effective. I think out of the meeting last week and the meeting that we just had on Monday, sounds like the most pressing issue for this committee is to put together that matrix. So Chuck, what are your thoughts on next steps to get that ironed out?
We did have, I don't know if Jen or we chat with Chuck and Jen a little bit this morning too on that. I'm gonna share that matrix with everybody. So if anybody that missed it Monday night, I'm gonna make sure I got the right. Let me make sure I got the right screen. I apologize. You see the screen, the matrix there?
Yes.
All right, cool. Yeah. So this one here, again, really the criteria. I think, and I think the question, Renee, is it maybe does it start with this subcommittee and go to the full committee of these criteria that you know that you want to use to evaluate the scenarios and what's important. I think obviously addressing enrollment, you know, and these came from an old one, so I would essentially recommend erasing these and coming up with fresh, you know, unique criteria for your scenarios. You know, some quick ones I think are you know, addresses enrollment concerns or projections. You know, obviously the elementary school level. Some maybe, you know, physical conditions, addresses physical conditions needs. I think traffic was one that's been pointed out. You know, effects on traffic or mitigating traffic along Route 10 seems to be one that
so Chuck, how about we just start with that? Let's just delete what you have in there and let's start populating that, and then
okay,
and then that way we're kind of working in parallel.
right,
how do you say? And then I think we do that today here, and we can circulate this around the email group for the committee, see if anyone has any comments, and if they do, we'll incorporate them, and then at the bigger meeting we have it approved or discussed, and we'll move from there.
Okay, that sounds good. I'll populate this if, you know, we can start with a rough draft here. So I put addresses, enrollment, projections, space requirements, and feel free to wordsmith as we go. And we could reorder these so physical plant needs. There, traffic is one we.
I would say elementary growth elementary enrollment projections.
Yeah, I think that one's the first one here, Renee.
Oh, okay, you have it there.
Yep.
That's why I thought it was a good idea. I was probably reading it on the back of my mind.
That's our data driven, right? So
happens to me all the time.
You know, I'm just gonna, you know, I think based upon what Rob Boris meant, you know, mill rate impact.
Yep.
Using that specific terminology. Now, you know, with that, and once we get through these, what we might want to do is create somewhat of a definition or, you know, defining what these mean, and that could be, net savings, not only the capital cost, but the net savings and ultimate impact. So if someone goes, well, what's that supposed to mean? Maybe we have a separate page or maybe down below that has a definition for those. So people can refer to those, because a lot of things can go into some of these items.
Right.
Yeah, there's a method called choosing by advantages. I don't know if you've used it before. And it's very similar to this, where you have the different options and then you have the parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And then under each parameter, you define the positive attributes of each, and you rank them. And then you don't rank the negatives, you only give points to the positives, basically. And then at the end of the day, you get the total on the last column there. It's pretty similar, but for example, I'll give you an example. Mill rate impact. How do you rate that? How do you put a number on that? Well, in this case, what we could do is, for example, say $100 increase is 3 points, or 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm sorry, 3 points. $200 increase is 2 points, and $500 increase is 1 point. So to put an example, just throwing crazy numbers out there, but we're gonna have to find a way to translate those intangible parameters into numbers that we can.
Yeah, because the enrollment, right? Obviously, I think it's pretty obviously options 1 and 2. Those options, with respect to the enrollment and addressing those, it's really yes, right? It's more of a yes and no, where 3 eventually will, but down the road, it really doesn't. It's really kind of a no, because you're going to get stressed early. Ultimately, it will. So yeah.
Can I add to that? Because whether we have the enrollment projections is one thing, but then that translates to, will that projection require redistricting to accommodate this? Will that school have to be redistricted to accommodate things? So somewhere in that position, people are going to say, I don't want it if my kid is going to have to be in a new district. I mean, I guess that's where I'm at. How do you get those smaller pieces in there? In other words, you're going to take all the kids from Dodd to a junior high. That's a positive. We think that's great. Now we've freed up space. On the other hand, what is the downside of that? Is that going to be a real negative? Would that take away from those things? And I hear you, Renee, with positives, but we got to balance. There's some negatives to some of these things, even though it's positive on one side, maybe a little negative on the other side. How do you weigh that? So how do you account for that in this chart, I guess, is what my question is.
I threw and we can change it, redistricting impacts. And again, how we, what does that encompass, Sylvia? And we can add more to the right, and then we can maybe weed them out and go, do they fall into
but that would be a
category?
And Chuck, there is one that Jeff brought up, and I'll steal it from him, which was when he was talking about a couple of the options of how many children benefit, if you do a project at a certain, and I think, whether it's families or children, however we want to wordsmith it, but I think it's, does the project bring a benefit to what % of the population of school children?
And Tony had added meet strict education ed spec.
So that one, I noted that one down. I saw that one in the meeting. So specifically to ed specs, and this is going to get a little technical here, is and it might be, I don't know if ed spec, I might be getting the words mixed up, Andrew and Jeff. Is it like Board of Education mission goals or something? Because ed specs are specific to a project that'll have, you select the middle school, that project's going to meet that, but the ed specs, it might be a different terminology, Jeff. I'm not sure if that's the right word to use.
No, I totally agree with that. That, you know, when Tony brought it up, I think I understand what he meant in the sense that he was trying to say, you know, does this really attack the various needs of the building? But an actual ed spec document, to your, you know, as you were just saying, Chuck, that's something that's, you know, really a detailed, you know, 40-page document that outlines every single element of each school, and you only really do that when you design the school itself. So I think the point is that to what degree does this project meet the educational benefits for our kids? And I think that, you know, that's different than the benefits all Cheshire students. But, you know, if we were to say, we're going to do a CIP project at Cheshire High, but we're not touching lab space and stuff like that, that's not really something that's dramatically impacting the educational benefit of our kids. Then throwing a new roof on the building isn't addressing the educational benefit component. And I think, you know, without specifically discussing that with Tony, I think that's what he was trying to get at.
I do too.
The other thing is the physical plant needs. That statement seems a little bit vague to me.
Okay.
I'm not really sure what it's saying there, Chuck. Is it more of the bones and, you know, and structure? Is that what?
Yeah, it's really, in my interpretation of it, is really addressing the physical conditions of the school, regardless of program, regardless of impact to students, of the roof's leaking, windows are old, really the physical,
The
probably
bones,
physical conditions.
Yep. Okay.
Maybe physical conditions might be, you know, and also, you know, code requirements.
Yeah, I was going to say ADA, I think, would fall in there too, right?
Yeah, I'll put code because there might be other, you know, indoor air quality,
Right,
potentially,
Fire.
ADA, and those I think all kind of can get grouped together as, you know, hey, we know the high school and Chapman have, you know, some strong, you know, needs from a physical perspective, regardless of programming in itself.
With the traffic, I mean, one of the points I was thinking about yesterday was traffic / you know, neighborhood impact. You know.
Expose my lack of typing skills right now.
Hey, Renee, can I make a quick comment on the matrix and just answer something that Sylvia had brought up there?
Sure.
Is in general, the idea of like the categories was the, like in what you're looking at is really just a summary sheet. So each of those categories would be broken down where you could address some of the things that aren't necessarily covered by the title as a whole. Like you were asking, you know, there's some positives and negatives within that. The idea would be you'd look at it on a little smaller scale to come up with a net score for that category, and that's kind of where it's coming from. So you'll be able to factor some of those additional things in there, Sylvia.
Okay, so here's my question then. I get that, and that's fine, but what is my ultimate response going to be in the line that says Highland School, I don't know, traffic? Are we putting a number score there? Are we ranking it from as 1 to 5 is the most important or the least important? Are we putting physical comments? Are we saying we're suggesting this is not a renovation, but a capital improvement? What method are we scoring these when we look at them so it's consistent with each school we look at?
Yeah, so that would be the way I had looked at it initially when we had talked about this with Chuck, was that would be a number score. So there'd be factors that kind of come up with how you're getting to that score in that category specifically. So they would all be looked at on the same scale, and they would have a relative number score to each other. And the idea was you would weight maybe, you know, maybe addresses enrollment projection is weighted at a higher level than, let's say, traffic, and you're going to get a net score at the end of it.
Yeah, and I think, when we're looking at these, obviously we're evaluating the scheme as a whole, right? That's the way I interpret it. There's multiple projects within these schemes, and looking at that scheme in its entirety. And there's going to be obviously pros and cons. And I don't know if it's going to be always black and white for every category. So there might need to be some type of a narrative, okay, for each scenario, okay, addresses enrollment projections. And we might have a description of, okay, why did we rank it 1 out of 5, maybe 1 out of 10 might give you a little more range, at least from a ranking. Then you can always weight them after that. But 1 to 10 maybe gives you a little more flexibility, I'm thinking. And it's going to be subjective. This isn't always going to be, black and white,
You just have to keep it as uniform as you can. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think I'm thinking that even a brief narrative as to what was the justification for giving it a 5 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 or whatever the case may be. And I'm sure people can argue, okay, it should be a 6 or it should be an 8. Okay, we can discuss that, but really the goal is look at the total and see which ones rise to the top. So it's not going to be perfect, but there's reason and rhyme behind the scores.
Yep, makes sense. Thank you.
I threw a couple more in here. I would only recommend 5 to 7. I just want to make sure we get all the ideas down, then we can whittle some out.
Chuck, and everybody, I think one of the important ones is modernizes school classrooms and learning spaces as a thought. So in other words, if we do a capital improvement plan that just addresses, roofs and other physical needs, but you're not modernizing the classrooms in that one, we'd want to rank that as one of the categories. We may have to work with what it is.
That's what Tony was
I think that's what he was referring to, yeah. Does that look right, modernizing the schools holistically? Because not just spot, but just everything.
Rather than holistically, I might go with instructional spaces.
Would we want to, do you guys use the 21st century learning vocabulary, Jeff and Vin, in your, some do, some don't? It's kind of a.
Yeah, it's not something that, we really try and pump into the vernacular.
Gotcha. Yeah, some kind of get a little carried away with it, I think, to be honest. So.
Well, we achieved the 21st century classroom when we finished the smartboard installation
There you
project.
go.
Or
Exactly.
at least we thought.
20th century classroom, Chuck. Come on.
There you go. All right. What else? We're getting a nice little roll here, I think. We have the mill rate impact. Is that the only would that be the only financial factor that you'd want to consider? It's just mill rate impact. I understand what Rob was saying, because that's kind of like I'll say the net impact.
I think that and I've been thinking here this whole time. I think that out of all these options, right, and I'm not counting the mill rate here, out of all these options, you have to.
Somebody's having fun with us. Awesome.
You have to assign importance factors to each one. For example, what is our key factor for the modernization plan? I mean, is it addressed enrollment projections, or is it modernizes the school spaces? So let's say it's modernizing all the school spaces. So, this one is 100. And then we apply relative factors to all these other ones based on this one. And then, for example, benefits to all Cheshire students compared to modernizing the instructional spaces is probably, 20. And traffic is probably 30. And, and so on. And then that will help you be able to, on each one of these projects, rate them based on this maximum allowable points that you have here. At the end of the day, you will add all of them on the total column, and you have a maximum that is basically the sum of all of this. But then what we want to do is we want to graph them. And on this side, you have the total points. Looks like my son's drawing here. On this side, you have the total points, right? Let's say that all of these sum 200. So you have 0 to 200 here. And then here, you have what we usually have here is either capital cost, but it could easily be the mill rate. So then you will have, at the end of the day, you will be able to graph the options here, and they will all fall at different points of this graph, because this is, I think the mill rate, the budget, the cost, or however you want to call it, I think that one is it's a factor that shouldn't be intermingled with the other ones. It needs to be considered in and out by itself. And this is a way of comparing everything else against that. And you can always pivot in between, but at the end of the day, this is a hard number. So I wouldn't call it impact. I would just call it mill rate increase.
Can I respond to that from the council perspective?
Yes.
And I agree with that. I think that if you listen to what Rob said, I think that's how the council will look at it. And they will say option A got 30 points, option B got 20 points, and option C got 10 points. And so we as the committee are recommending first A and then B. And so they're going to say, okay, A, if we do all those things that you told us in all of those categories, it's going to meet all these needs. Then the mill rate impact is going to be X. And if we do option B and we do all of those things that you voted on and you found as being important, then the mill rate will be this number. If neither of those are within the reach of their planning or their concern, then maybe that's where you start slicing and dicing from a Chinese menu and say, okay, we have to eliminate this on this side and add it to this side, whatever, change this.
Right. And what this will allow you to do, Sylvia, is if you have, when we do the sensitivity analysis with Mr. Jasper, is you can draw a line here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can draw a line here, and then everything that is to the right of that line, you know, all those options are above what the budget is.
Right.
And you can draw some bands here and use this for your sensitivity analysis, because I understand the cost per se is not important. The mill rate and the impact to the taxpayers is, but I think at some point, you know, the hard decisions will be weighing how much it's going to cost to the taxpayers versus all the other benefits.
Right. One of the things we don't have in there, and it's so subjective, I don't know how you can quantify it in this thing, but it's always one of the arguments that comes up is, what am I getting for my tax money? I'm getting good schools, but am I also getting improvement in my property values? And are we raising the taxes so high that our businesses are not attracted to come to Cheshire or may leave from Cheshire? And those are things that the council will look at and say, I think the council, I think I can speak for everybody on the council. We know that something has to be done, and we recognize that there are hard decisions that are going to have to be made. But those are the things that are going to help guide what their allowable budget is going to be. So though, just a flat out mill rate based on that particular project, then for the council has to be plugged into, oh my gosh, we need to upgrade something, you know, pick it, the sewer plant we just did. So that's not a problem, but you know, there are other capital improvements that need to be done in town. So we need to put that in our priority list and say, okay, can we do without sewers? Well, probably not. So we need to keep that in the budget. Can we do without, you know, another capital project so that we can afford it? And so that's where the council is going to go with those numbers. And if they can look at the benefit risk relationship, then that's where the argument will come. I don't think they will argue at all the fact that probably all these things are needed, but we've got to manage the risk reward part. So I agree with that, your theory there, Renee, about keeping those numbers out. Let's look at what our project is. Our project is to fix the schools. How to do that? We want them all to be brand new. We can't build them all brand new, but that's the project. So
Mhm.
how do these things go into it? And forget about the cost at the moment. And then find a way to quantify it when you've got all those things. That would be my feeling. I'm not a money manager, but that's how I would do it if
Should
it
the
was.
mill rate impact be the rating of that be a town council rating and not a SMC rating?
Right, that's what I mean. So
I think that's a hard number, Chuck. I think that will come from Mr. Jasker. That's going to be,
That's all part of the discussion. Yeah.
that's going to be, it's not a, that's going to be a number. The mill rate is going to increase 2 points, 3 points. So I
So
will
do
call
we
it mill
delete it
rate
off this
increase.
matrix altogether and say, listen, we're going to put forth what we think's got to be done to meet school modernization and enrollment in this. You guys do the numbers and you tell us what,
Right.
if it's above that, like that line you're saying to the right of the line,
Yep.
Renee, that, hey, if it's above the right of the line, this is a no-go, right? These options just are too much.
Right.
And we just take it out of this matrix altogether, understanding that that's how they're going to evaluate part of it.
well,
I think having it in is an important tool. And I mean, I think it's going to be a group effort filling in all the blanks here.
Right. And I feel that we need that when we go to the town council, whatever our ranked project is, we need that information from JASCOT.
Right.
We can't go in there without knowing what the total mill rate increase is going to be to the town.
Yeah, I
But
think we put it
maybe-
in and we tell
I
him
was clear about
fill in the blank here based on the information you give him about the different options, which.
So let's do,
But I think your point, Chuck, was to have that column there be after the fact, essentially after the SMC has weighed in on those other 6 or 7 columns. Then Mr. Jascott then weighs in with the mill rate.
right.
Correct? Right. Okay.
so like over to the right of the total, we're saying, John?
Right after the fact, almost, because I don't think the committee is the one that would be necessarily gauging the impact of the mill rate as much as Mr. Jascott would, so that
Right.
the committee is weighing in on these 6 or 7 columns or issues, and then based on that, then the finance side of things come into play, and then they give their input based on the rankings that these other 6 columns provide.
And that can be done before it ever goes to the council for a specific presentation, because then we
Sure.
put the SMC part and the finance part together. And looking at that, the SMC may choose to tweak it a little and change their recommendation to the council. But in any case, all that information is provided. But I don't know that the council needs to be part of that deliberation. Jim can come up with those numbers. Jim Jascott can come up with those numbers just by calculating them,
Right.
just to get
Right.
numbers.
They're a math that's a math exercise.
Right,
Right.
right.
If we just need to make sure he knows what the phasing of the project is, so he knows,
Yep.
over how many years we're going to be looking to do the bonding. So then we know exactly what the mill rate impact will be year by year.
Yeah, and we did for it. Was it Tuesday, yesterday, he requested just that draft information. We did send it to Jim to start probably playing with numbers a bit, start cranking a few out. I think, Andrew, what you're saying is what our next steps from Colliers is John and I, we're going to start putting timelines and actual schedule, because the cash flow is going to be dependent upon the schedule.
Mhm.
We're going to develop cash flows based upon each scenario and go, okay, high level timeline of, okay, here's the first project, here's the second, the phase 2, whether they're, renovations, whatever have you, but really putting together a timeline that we can see, like Renee was like, hey, we need to see the whole cost. So now we need to see the schedule and where this
When the money's
timeline
going to need to be
is
out.
reasonable, and then apply a cash flow to it and go, how much are we spending per month or per year in this, and is it too much for a certain time period, too big of a budget for a certain time period? Then that way Jim can even fine tune his numbers better.
Andrew, on the Board of Education, you have a finance committee, correct?
We do. Yep.
And the same on the council. So maybe that's where Jim works on his numbers and Vin works to give the right numbers to Jim that are BOE numbers that he needs to have. And those committees are like our subcommittee that we're sitting in right now of Board of Ed and Council. So they have a little bit of prior information to see how we're coming up with these numbers, and allows them to put in a little bit of input as those numbers are being developed before the official proposal is put together. Does that make any sense or not?
Yes, it does. I also thought that there was talk at the last SMC meeting about potentially putting together a finance subcommittee of the school modernization. Is that true, Renee?
Yes.
Yes, I heard about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that was suggested by Mr. Walsh.
So maybe there's one council representative, one assembly member, and one Board of Ed, just like this one, when you're developing those numbers with Mr. Jascott.
Perfect.
I mean, that would be my suggestion. Then you'd have at least buy-in from those groups before you presented it to them. There would be some prior knowledge of the thought process of how we got here, and gives them a chance to think about it a little bit too.
Great. And Vin Massiano's going to be on it too. He just doesn't know it yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Quickly
Jim
to
Jascott's doing
respond
it
to
all,
that,
I
there's Sylvia, that finance committee is going to happen, it sounds like. And
Good.
there is some meetings kind of set up with Jim Jascott, Jen and myself.
Good.
And we're kind of wrapping all of that in. We need to include that mill rate information in our presentation, just so you guys know.
That's great.
Another category I'll throw out there for the group is improvements to parking and/or driveways. And, fields are another issue. So I think we should, we can lump that together as one category: parking, driveways, fields.
Site improvements.
Yeah, site improvement makes sense, / neighborhood impact. Or if we want to make it its own category.
I mean, you want to have parking and driveway. I think in those words need to be in there, because that's really where the bigger deficiency is. It's the parking and the driveways. If we, look at a project and we're making improvements there, that would be solving one of the, clearly identified deficiencies that we have.
Could I suggest that the site improvements be your overall category, and maybe the neighborhood impact, traffic impact, and vehicular flow be like the subcategories that are making that up? So if we're putting a score to these things, we got to think in terms of how you're going to score them. You don't want it to be a ranking system. You want it to be a numerical value of, this addresses X number of subcategories, so it gets this score. So you're getting a net score at the end of it.
Makes sense.
I think we're going to have a separate document for that, Chuck, that lists each of these, whether it's a description or specific bulleted items of, what it addresses. I'm not sure what the best way to go, to go about that is.
Yeah, I think that's the document you and I were talking about with Jen this morning.
I can show you.
Together.
Let me find something here that I've done in the past. That could be a good example.
While you're doing that, Renee, the other category is improves energy efficiency of the building. So building envelope, however you want to word that. I'm just going to keep throwing out these ideas, and then we could refine them. But that's another area that is certainly something we'd want to consider. And I don't want to have to answer to the Energy Commission if we don't have it on here.
But if you're going to do that, you could talk about building security. I mean, we could continue to go down if you get into that sort of level.
Yeah, and I think what I think we do is we just keep listing them all. We might have 20, but we might consolidate this into like the physical condition needs in code and safety. We might take a couple and then those could be bullets, underneath. I'm just going to keep adding, additional ones just for the time being, and we can clean it up, afterwards.
Can I share my screen, Chuck, just to
Yes,
show
sir.
you?
I'll stop and you should be able to share. I get to scribble on yours now.
This is something we do routinely for Brown. They like to use this system, and we've been successful at it. So options are on the top. Then you have a description of what each one is. Then you have kind of a bulletized list of what they represent. And then you go into each factor at the bottom. So you have this factor. In this case, we were installing a generator. So it was reliability of service, maintenance, availability, etc. And you have a number of factors. Then at the end, you had cost. So what you do is you start taking your factor one is usually your anchor factor. So that's the more important one. In this case, it was an emergency generator. So reliability was the most important one. So we'll give that one 100. And then based on that, well, maintenance versus reliability, how is important. So we'll start setting the weights of the scores. And then here you'll set the actual score. So, I mean, I can send this to you if it's of any use, so you could steal some ideas. But back to Chuck's point, in the header here, perhaps you can put a short description of what it is, and we can keep everything on the same sheet.
Yeah, I could probably, put it, I think, Renee, what we can do, just a suggestion is we can put it here and just, we can put description. And then underneath, I could just make it smaller, and type it in and maybe have, wrap the text in so somebody can read it directly below.
Right. Throw some bullet points in there. It's a great tool. It's a great tool. And then.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of these, I think, will get combined together. Like this one here, this one here might be.
We're not looking at your screen, by the way. I stopped sharing.
Sorry. I'm working away on my own here. Sorry. We back there.
Yeah.
So maybe, in this one, and we don't have to go crazy with it. Where's my bullets? Where's my bullets? Why can't I find my bullets? But anyways, it'd be, security, energy.
Right.
Improvements. I just got to format it.
ADA.
Yeah, absolutely.
The need for the proper electrical connections to service all the, I don't know the terminology, but wiring so that you can service all the computer needs. What do you call that?
IT infrastructure? Or?
Yeah. You can't plug in the computer because there's no outlet, then you're in trouble, right?
Yeah, that's kind of an example. I think that look kind of what you're thinking, Renee, maybe. Something along those lines, maybe.
Right, and then you can add a weight at the bottom there, but we can do that a little later because the first thing we need to do is define all the options, and then we need to pick what's our top option or our top criteria, and then weight the other ones, and then here's the big question: does that weighing happens at this subcommittee or at the bigger committee? Because obviously that will play an important factor.
I would recommend it in this smaller committee, Renee, at least recommend the scenarios in the weights, and then let your bigger committee respond to it, and then maybe you tweak it, because anytime you leave it open-ended, right, it's gonna.
No, we don't want to do that. No, exactly. But that's a good point. We can recommend a weight and then but open it for discussion, because we certainly don't want to preclude others from commenting on that.
Can I just clarify this for my own self, because I'm hoping I'm understanding it right? These subcategories under this physical condition, you are suggesting, Renee, that we choose the most important one of those first. So
Well, no, from the first row, I'm suggesting out of all these options here, I'm suggesting we pick the most important one.
oh, okay.
And you give that one 100.
Okay.
And then we go C, D, E. Okay, C is compared to 100. C is 30.
Okay.
And then you go on and on.
Okay, got it. Okay, just wanted to be sure I had that right.
Mhm.
Makes sense.
But I think this is, so if say someone from the public goes, well, kind of like we're saying, well, what does it mean by physical conditions, needs, and
Right.
code requirements? This will give them an idea of what the things we're thinking about when we're doing it. You know, and we can add obviously some more. So, you know, improved energy, we put under here. So maybe that one goes away under this one. We have school security on there. And I guess in that one specifically, because that's such a hot topic with schools, the SSIC is a School Security Infrastructure Council. I think if I got that right. Sometimes matrices keep them separate because it is such a hot topic, but totally up to you.
Right.
And you know, in my experience, you could have some of these parameters that are repeat, that even though they're different criteria, but they are directly correlated. Like if you, for example, do a physical, if you address code requirements, you will probably be addressing site security as part of that. So basically these two are always going to be weighted the same. And when you go down the list, then you always have 30 here and 30 here. So, you know, those can always be condensed into one, because at the end of the day, they always go in parallel. So,
yeah, and that's where having, I think, these descriptions of, you know, what are we talking about with this fact, with this criteria, you know, do we delete that and just put it under this one here?
I think we do, because we're describing the projects at such a high level. We're basically saying new, renovate as new, or CIP. I think it's safe to say that both in the new and renovate as new options, all those
they're going to be all
plan
addressed.
Requirements, they're all going to be addressed. So.
Come up with a description here as you guys are thinking.
Okay, so
I have a hard stop right at 6:30, Renee. I do apologize.
okay, so let's at least agree on the criteria, and then maybe we can quickly use the next 10 minutes to assign some quick weights to it. So address enrollment projections and space requirements. That one I think needs to be there.
Yep.
Physical conditions code requirements needs to be there. Traffic is one on its own. Redistricting is one of its own. Benefits all Cheshire students, yes. Modernizing the school instructional spaces. Yes, I don't think that one and this one are linked together.
No, those are two separate thoughts.
Yeah, they're separate thoughts. So this one stays. Value added to the town. I want to. This one needs some explaining. I know what you're getting at. Value or you always going to have value added to the town by you're investing, right? But I'm just thinking how you weigh
How do you
that.
quantify it?
Right. It's not that we can determine
Yes.
whether new businesses are going to come as a result. We can estimate that the grand list is going to increase, but by how much, I think we're better served by not putting criteria that is hard to quantify or to rate, or because
Yeah.
then we start muddying the waters.
Well,
Yep.
and if I could just throw in here, the whole traffic neighborhood impact, I don't know how that's going to rate. Whereas, some people in the Dodd neighborhood are going to be glad that Dodd's no longer in. But I know I look over the cornfield on Marion Road right now, and there might be a school dropped in the corn that's going to impact my neighborhood. So,
Yeah, I think, and when
or
you're
Route 10,
when you're looking at either Marion Road or Dodd or other locations that currently exist, to what degree will this plan ease the congestion that already exists or be able to facilitate? So if we were to build a new facility in 2020, the traffic runs and all that would be dramatically different than they were in 1950 or 1960. So, I think we could safely say a new building, that would be a substantial consideration, how we get traffic in and out. As it relates to benefit to the community, the only thing I would think there is, for example, when, Vin and I have talked about things like vacating Dodd Middle School, I think that becomes a new park and rec in my mind. It would be a perfect home for a new park and rec facility, Arts Place, even Humiston. I think the Arts Place, Park and Rec, things like that, it enhances the quality of life for the people who live here, because now you have an actual park and rec facility that has a gymnasium, and the cafeteria space could be used for group exercise and things like that. Outside of that scenario, I think it's hard to envision, is I think you were saying, Renee, what value added there really is.
Right. And this is one that lends itself, the traffic one, to be positive or negative, right?
Jeff, can I answer Jeff's comment for just a second?
Yeah.
I agree, Jeff, with that. But I think we have to be careful, because if the use of that building, to do a recreation center or consolidate Arts Place or Humiston is more educational, but the other uses of it are going to be determined by the town council and can't be determined by this committee. We can only make those suggestions and say, but I'm not sure that we can put that in as part of the plan.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I don't think it's easy to do.
We have to be careful about that. I'm not saying I disagree with it. I think it might be a very good idea, but that has to be a separate argument or a separate topic, and it has to be vetted in budgetary places. And we can't assume that the town would do that and assume that, because if they do, they're going to have a building anyway. So I agree. I think the value to the community comes in maybe a little bit more when Jim is doing all his assumptions of, he knows what his grand list revenue is likely to be, and he can project those things. And by having a new school, he can maybe project a little bit that there'll be more people in town, they'll be paying more taxes, it might bring more business to the town. I think that's more what I was thinking, was the complete result of something new might enhance the town in an economic development way. And we don't know what that is. And I don't think we can even begin to guess that now, especially in light of all the other things that are going on in the world. I mean, we don't have, the Board of Ed doesn't have control over that. So that to me doesn't seem to be here. I would,
Is that better as a survey question whenever that comes out?
Yes, I would think so.
Yeah, actually, the 400 or 500, does improve in these schools in whatever scenario, you believe it adds value to the town. And I think the obvious question should be yes, but some people may not feel that.
Exactly.
Who knows?
And you may have somebody said to me, look, I'm of the age, I'm 70 something, they're my friend age groups, and they say, I'll vote for all this. I can vote for all of it. It's no problem. I'm leaving in 2 years.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I'm going to leave it for the rest of the people, right? So, there's all sorts of different opinions, and you need to be representative of everybody. So,
Right.
So what's to the right of this, Chuck? Do we have more?
No, I was just making more space. There's a total here, Renee, and I
Okay.
can send this out to you guys. I put the mill rate part off to the right based upon our discussion. Keep it out of,
mhm.
have it noted that, hey, once we get them valued, you can add the mill rate. Again, my recommendation, I wouldn't get much more out of 5 to 7, maybe 8 criteria, because then it really starts getting broad,
Yeah.
and that's just my recommendation. I mean, I can just delete these,
Wait,
for now.
leave one in there, because I think as we're looking at all these, I think we need one that weighs the CIPs versus the new building or renovated new. I think we need a criteria that favors renovated new and renovated new. I'm sorry, renovated new or new building. So I was thinking here maybe life expectancy of the investment or something along those lines.
I'll just draft that in there. Maybe we can change it, but yeah. Yeah, we might change it, but yeah, at least we'll capture that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Chuck, I know you have a hard stop. You want to send me this? I think we need to continue here and fill out this weight so we can feel that we accomplished something today.
And I tell you what, if Renee, if you guys want to keep going, I'll just I can make you the host or whoever the host. If you guys want to keep moving and working as John, you have this is in the
He left.
Is it in the scenarios folder?
yes, directly under the scenarios folder. So I'll get out of
Okay.
it. You can open it up and continue with the team.
Yeah, I can pick it up.
Yeah,
And,
I
yeah,
at
that
least
way you
want to
guys-
assign the weights.
Yeah.
That way, by assigning the weights, we can present it to the committee.
Sharon, there we go. Some reason. Right up. Right. Oh, I'm not the host. I'm sorry. I'm not the host. Arnett, you're the host. I'm sorry. I'm used to being the host on these, so my apologies. Sorry about that. So hey, I do apologize for having to cut out early, but you're in good hands with John.
No problem.
I'll catch up with you guys, and then John, maybe once we get it, we can send it over to Renee and the team, and you guys can
Sure.
fill it with a little bit more as well.
Excellent.
I think you should be seeing my
Thank you.
screen now.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank
we
you. See you
it.
tomorrow.
Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
All right, John, you're in control.
You have my screen? Okay. I just make sure I'm on the right screen for you.
All right, so the next step here is which one of these factors is the most important one? What do you think, Andrew?
Of all the factors?
Yeah, from B to I.
Probably one. The B addresses enrollment project space requirements.
What do you think, Sylvia?
I'm torn between the two. The physical condition of the school is what prompted us to begin this project to begin with. And that led to looking into all of those other conditions. So I think they're so closely related that I would find it difficult to make too big a distinction between those two. But when you look at the projects, the physical condition of the schools is what we're talking about. Even if we do capital improvements, we're looking at physical improvements to accommodate the enrollment projections. So either one. I mean, I'd go with either one.
Yeah, I mean, I go with either one. The only reason why I said that is because the physical condition, I think you could argue that some of our buildings, like Cheshire High School, is in worse condition than a lot of our elementary schools. But the elementary schools, because of the space requirements based on the enrollment projections, are going to really need to be dealt with first.
Good point. So you won me
That's-
over. No, but that's a good point.
So physical condition is 100?
No,
Oh,
Other way.
way around.
The other way, okay.
Right.
Okay. So
How's
for
that?
physical condition, so what would be the rating of physical condition? I don't think you're too far off, John. I think it's pretty close. It's either 90 or 80.
I would say it might be
Yeah,
95.
Right, exactly. I mean, I
Yeah.
just think they're so close that it's hard to
And
differentiate.
this is okay because what you have here is that one criteria could trump the other, right? They're equally important,
Right.
and and that's fine at the end of the equation. So okay, traffic neighborhood impact.
It depends on whose neighborhood, I think,
That's it. That's where I'm at.
as Andrew was saying earlier.
Well, right, but it is. I think we need to reword this one because I think this needs to be positive neighborhood impact. Is that what we're talking about? Or positive impact to traffic? It cannot be neighborhood impact because that could be either good or bad. And this is a good rating. This is choosing by advantages. So
Yeah, traffic, traffic improvement.
it needs to be traffic
Improve
improvement.
impact to the traffic pattern.
Right.
I don't know. No. Okay.
Improve traffic patterns.
Right.
I mean, I've accepted the fact that Route 10 is the way that it is, right? I mean,
It
unless we're gonna, I mean, I've seen there's been some sort of like connector study or parallel route, which will never,
Andrew, I served on 3 consecutive Route 10 study committees, 1970, 1980, 1985, or 90. And each time we recommended things which could have been implemented then, which can't be done anymore, would have been a rerouting the traffic around on Route 10 and given us the town center and all that stuff. It's too late. We missed that boat, right?
Yep. That's kind of where I'm at. I get it.
I'm not sure that I would put that as the next one. I'm thinking that I might say that the modernizing of the schools would be a higher thing than the impact of traffic. And if I'm a parent, I want my kids to go to modernized schools, and that's what our physical condition is going to do, is to modernize the school. So if I were going to put them in order, I would put the modernizing the school for the next one.
Me
And
too.
before we wait it, then I would go to the parents are really concerned about, well, I was going to say the traffic patterns outside the school are important, but also the circulation inside the school for busing and drop off relates to the safety of their kids.
Yes,
And that's
yep.
a concern that they have.
Saw
So
that this week.
I might put that one, and then the impact of the traffic in the neighborhood. And then I'd go beyond, and I'd probably put the redistricting impact toward the end.
What is life expectancy of investment? What do we mean by that exactly?
So if you build a new facility, it's like a 50-year lifespan. If you do capital improvement project, depends, 10, 15 year. If you do a renovation, it's 20, 25 year. So, when can you anticipate these, these buildings needing to be refreshed again? I think is like with the way I interpreted it.
Yes, that was exactly my point, Jeff.
And I don't want to do this ever again, so it has to be quick. It has to last a long time.
Yes, please.
But that was just my opinion. You guys.
Yeah, I know. So let's jump into this one then. Modernize the schools, which has a number 1 there. So what should be the weight of that one?
Renee, can I make a comment real quick on your weights?
Go ahead.
I think it would be, if you looking at weights and you just keep going down the line of like what's the next most important, you're going to end up with a lot that are at the same weight. So when you get to the end, you're going to have very little difference on a weight between what you mark as like 100, let's say. If you take like what's the, I don't want to say least important, but like what you weight the least, then you're going to have a scale that you can kind of work the others in between to kind of get your weights together. You know
Good
what I mean?
idea.
Good idea. That works. So if you start with the last one first, basically move up.
Yeah, that's a good
Just a
idea. So
suggestion. I mean,
you
you
have
could do
2
it either
points.
way, but-
Yeah, no, but you have 2 points in the graph, and then you pick all the other ones in between.
Right. So which is our least important? I'm going with traffic pattern.
In the school, in the school site itself.
No, the impact of traffic pattern,
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
not the site vehicular.
Okay, I would. I
You
could,
mean this one?
the community pattern. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, I'd agree with that.
So what is that? A 20, a 15? Compared to addressing the enrollment projections and the physical conditions of the school, how important is the traffic? For example, if the option is to renovate in place the high school, leave the traffic the way it is.
Yeah,
How
I was-
important?
10, and then it looked like Andrew was, I'll see your 10 and raise you a 5.
I would put it way down there, 10 or 20.
Yeah, 10. I'd go 10.
10. Okay.
And then, like Chuck was saying, then we could populate backwards.
Yeah.
All right. Now we have 2 points. We have the most important one and we have the least important one.
And it's not like these things all have to be equidistant apart.
No.
You know,
Right.
we're
No.
very clearly indicating here that we've got option, priority 1 and 1A. And, maybe it is a more distant 2 or 3. But, I just my 2 cents on the modernizing the school's instructional spaces, I think is a higher priority for us. I would probably consider that on like an 80 scale.
Yeah, I would say 80. or
I would go with 80 on that.
Yeah, ideally we want to do this so that when somebody raises the question of, well, did you consider the traffic impacts for that? We can say yes, but it was
Yes.
severely outweighed by the fact that it addresses enrollment projections and
Right.
whatever we have highly rated.
Right.
So.
Let me ask this question. When you benefit all students or you redistrict, are those 2 separate questions? Or when you redistrict, it indirectly eventually would affect all Cheshire students, wouldn't it, in some way? So is the language quite right? Are we asking this?
Yeah, the redistricting impact, I think that might need to be rewarded. Think of it as an advantage. Benefits all Cheshire students, so that's an advantage.
Right. Exactly.
Redistricting impacts, not clear what the advantage. I don't think redistricting is an advantage, right?
No.
Only in the sense that it would address your space needs, but we've already addressed that in the first one. So I'm not sure that couldn't be a subcategory under.
That could be under the benefits.
Or,
section.
or benefits or under space, because by redistricting, we're addressing the space, aren't we?
Yeah. That's another one.
So I'm
And
not.
that is,
One.
that's a negative, kind of like the mill rate increase though.
Yeah.
Because,
Right.
I guarantee I can't find you a kindergarten parent who says, let me tell you about the advantages of redistricting.
Well, let's eliminate it. Why do we
Yeah.
why do we have it in there
It's
at all?
not an advantage, and it really muddies the water here. I agree.
Let's get-
All set, Sylvia.
If you wanted to look at a criteria, could you just say like impact to the students in terms of like schools that they end up going to? Because there's also like the 5 to 8 or 5-6 option out there with a 7 to 8. So I mean, you could rate like what kind of impact the plan has on the students versus what they have now. Let's say.
So the benefit would be, or the advantage would be, less
A consistent.
student consistency of building consistency.
Yeah. So for example, on like the impact to students, I would think like you'd have picture a rating scale of 1 to 5, you know, with like 5 being little impact on the way students matriculate through the schools currently. So
Good word,
you know,
Chuck. Good word. Matriculate. I like that. You must
I'm
have
trying, Sylvia. So like right now they only change schools, you know, in certain districts, they may only change schools twice. You know, they go from their elementary school to Dodd to the high school.
Right.
Whereas in some of these scenarios, maybe they have 4 schools that they would go to. So maybe that scenario gets like a 3 rating. A redistricting scenario maybe gets even lower, like 2, because, you know, maybe you're going to take kids from one district to another. So you can kind of rate each scenario on how it affects the impacts the students on all them levels.
And those would be the subtitles under this benefiting all the
Under
students.
this,
Cheshire students, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Because I think, but maybe still a separate one, because benefit all Cheshire students was what percentage of the population receives the benefit of the buildings, right?
Well, all students are going to receive the benefit. Oh, you mean?
Not if you build a new
Well,
elementary.
high school.
yeah, that
Yeah.
depending on which
Right.
scenario you pick.
Okay,
So
I get it. Yeah.
So I think that one is a standalone one, and I don't know how high that one rates, right? But I think the one Chalk is referring to is more related to how many buildings do a student need to attend over the course of his life at Cheshire Public Schools, right?
Yeah. I think that would be like a rating that you could put on that. And I don't know how much time you guys got, but if you got like a minute, I could just show you like a decision matrix that I had kind of talked to Chuck about of how we were basing this. And this is just how I'm thinking about it in my head. So I don't want to like steer you guys in the wrong direction, but I'll just show you something that we have used for like decision matrix on this is for bridge replacements in particular, but same idea applies. Hang on one second. How do we share here? Desk is so far away here. Hang on.
Clean your desk. Clean your desk. Neat desk is always easy.
Organized, Chuck, organized.
Organized desk.
Where do I go to share?
at the bottom of the screen, Chuck, there should be a
Oh,
green
there it is.
green share button.
Yep.
Yep. There you go.
There
So
you
you're looking at this Excel sheet here.
Okay. Can you make it bigger or is that it?
I can make it as big as you want here. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So in general, this is just like a decision matrix, and we'd have the same idea. So these would be your categories that we have along the top, and then these are the descriptions you were kind of coming up with along the side. So like a 1 through 5 would be given a rating for, you know, how it affects that. So on this one, for example, work zone geometry, in this case would be, you know, impact to student matriculated, whatever we want to call it. And then you'd have like a 1 is this type of impact through 5 is this type of impact. And you do the same thing for the other categories. So for example, on like addresses enrollment projections, you know, it would be a little simpler where you really would only have like a 1 or a 2 rating that would give you like a high or a low score. But that's the idea, is you're kind of like taking those factors, and maybe this has a weight like you just had of 100 out of, you know, whatever it is, 200, maybe it's 50%. And then you're multiplying that kind of at the end to get your net score at the end of the day. So
combining that with Renee's proposal, I can see that's what we're sort of headed toward, is making our own kind of.
exactly.
Our
And
own kind
yep, just kind of
those-
simplifying it a little bit onto a single sheet, but kind of be thinking in terms of like how you're going to rate it within that category. Like it shouldn't just be like a yes or a no where you give it the full 100 points versus you give it 0. It's got to be kind of like a scale inside of that. That's all.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely better objectifies the process.
Yeah. So that's all I wanted to share. Sorry, guys.
No, that was good.
So how,
So am I to understand that in these subcategories where there are descriptions, where, go to the second one that we filled it out, so that, in that one, we've got that weight is 95, and within that 95, each one of those subcategories gets a 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5. Okay, and then we add those up, and that, how do we get to the 95? You know, how do we?
no, I think the method Chuck was describing is I mean, they're both rating methods, but I think they're different. So we need to pick one and run with it.
Right.
Yeah, I was just saying that's how I've been thinking of it. So when I'm talking about the ratings in there, that's just how I've kind of been going about it. However you guys want to come up with it. I was just giving you an
Okay.
example of how I was looking at the weighting and everything before. That's all.
And Sylvia, just to clarify, these bullet items here are essentially just to, break down or explain what this upper, category
Right.
entails.
Okay.
I mean, you're not, rating each of these separately. And then the 95 is just a factor that's multiplied on ultimately the number that comes in down here on these rows.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to make it easier, John, what you could use the 95 as a max number, and then here you would rate him 90 or 98, and that way he's already weighted for you.
Oh, okay. See what you're saying.
All right, let's keep going. Benefits all Cheshire students. To me, that it would be great if it could benefit a large amount of the population, but at the end of the day, this factor could interfere with doing the right thing. And I think it is important, but I don't know. To me, it's like 35 or.
I was thinking 30 in my head.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
You can
I
go
mean,
with
I
30.
think it's a much bigger factor when it comes to the polls than it is in this, like, doing what's right,
Yeah, like, I feel like the life expectancy of investment, that should be up around 60 to 70.
Yeah, I was going to say that should be the next one under 80. It seems to me somewhere
Yeah.
under 80.
So I'd put 70. Yeah.
60, 70, whatever. Yeah. Right. Right. That I was just going to say, so bring it down. So how does that work out?
And we can still tweak a little bit. So we have some that are really high, the first two. Then we have modernized the school, and then we have a bunch of smaller ones. But all the smaller one combined can make up for one of the bigger ones. So
Right.
Yeah, the improvements to site/vehicular circulation, I would even call that a 25. I don't even know that. I mean, I don't know how that.
yeah, I don't think that's a 50.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, because I don't think this is safety related, right? I think all safety is being done on column C.
Yeah.
Right. Safety's here.
So this is more a nice to have. That's how you see it, Jeff?
Yeah, certainly parking, parking at DOT is an absolute nightmare. But I couldn't put it, on anywhere near half the scale of the physical condition needs of the facility or something like that. But
Right.
I think it's fair placed at 25.
Okay.
I think that is life expectancy of investment too high at 70? Should it be like 60?
That was the number I had in my head, but
Yeah.
yeah, but it's
That's
important.
fine with me.
You spend all that money, you've got to outlive the bond,
No, and that goes hand in hand with the fiscal responsibility, right? You don't want to have a high mill rate for a project that is not going to last long.
Right.
And for example, when you have a CIP, and I think this is a very important factor, because when you have CIP projects that have very low reimbursement, that's going to show right there.
Absolutely. So I think that I wouldn't be opposed to where it is.
Okay. All right. So how about we focus 5 minutes here on these two? Are they okay at 195, or do we need to adjust this 95 a little bit?
I think you're pretty good there.
I wouldn't adjust it much more than down to 90, to be honest, Renee.
No.
Yeah, I was
I
thinking
agree.
90.
I just think they're so close. Like I said, my very first statement, I think they could flip and I'd be okay too. So I really think we're okay with them that way. Those are the two major things we're looking to do: improve the physical condition and to address the enrollment. And hard to separate those two. The rest of them would be really nice, but those two are the primary things we're looking at. So what do you think, Andrew? Where are you?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Sylvia.
I will say this. I think, John, I think you and Chuck can perhaps fill this out.
Right. We'll fine tune that. We'll add the bullet items there, and then we'll get this to everybody tomorrow.
But before we adjourn, let's do a test run of one category here and see how our little ranking system plays out.
All right, Marlene has to do it.
Get a test done.
All right. So who's our guinea pig? Is it Marlene?
I'm with you.
All right.
All right.
So what are we looking at? Number one, new elementary school capital.
Capital improvements to the remaining elementary schools, and then renovating the high school.
Ooh.
It is in that order.
Mm-hmm.
Come into play, down the road with these other scenarios. So.
Well, that certainly helps the enrollment for elementary.
Yes.
So then, Renee, the next question is, what is the ranking then? Is it 1 to 5? Is it 1 to 10?
Is it, in this case, it's 1 to 100, and you pick this number at the max, and then it's already wait for it.
Okay. All right. So then, Marlene.
So then, if you add this up here, John, if you add this column at the end, this is your max rating that any category could have. If you add all of this up here.
All right. I'm not sure if Chuck hasn't set that up that way yet, but okay, go ahead.
So I'm assigning a number from 1 to 100 for each of these.
Well, no, 1 to 100 on this one, 1 to 95,
1 to 95 on this one,
Yeah.
1 to 10.
Okay. Address enrollment projections, space requirements. Okay. A new elementary school, renovate the high school. I think that's pretty high. Let's say 90. Physical condition, ADA, capital improvements to elementary schools, renovate the high school. So that's the only one that doesn't really have DOD in it, though. That would be the next one. All right, but this is we're just practicing. So let's give it an 80.
Good.
Impact to traffic patterns. Well, I guess that would depend where it was.
The implication in this scenario is that the new school would be at the site. Unfortunately, I don't know the roads, but
Marion Road.
Yes.
My backyard.
Yes. Yeah. By Andrew's house.
Yeah, by Andrew's house.
0
I use his driveway to get in.
to 0.
Great access. Great access.
All right, so it's going to take some of the traffic then off of Route 10. So let's give it an 8.
Sorry, Andrew.
It's whatever. That's what I got.
So can we, while we're here, I identify something here. Can we change impact to improvement of traffic patterns here?
That would help.
Okay.
All right, so renovating the high school, that's gonna benefit everyone. The elementary schools will benefit a small percentage of the total. So let's go with 15, 20? 20.
Which one? 20?
15.
Okay. I'll give you 17 and a half if you want.
That sounds good. Modernize the school's instructional spaces. All right, capital improvements. I don't know, that's kind of 50?
Okay.
Yeah, there's a large number of buildings that just get capital improvements, not
Right.
not
Right,
all
which,
of them.
yeah,
then it
which is
could
not
even be
gonna
lower.
ideally impact the school's modernization.
Yeah. Improvements to site vehicular circulation. Yeah, I think that's pretty low. 7?
Good.
Life expectancy of investment. I would think that that investment, well, you're only doing capital improvements, so the
And
life
you're only
expectancy-
renovating the high school.
Dot.
Still have old
Yeah.
bonds.
is
Yes, and
30?
Dodd is not being addressed in this one.
Yeah,
So 30.
that might be on the high side.
I'm sorry, I missed the number, Marlene?
Oh,
30.
30?
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No.
All right, so that option has 285 out of 410 potential points.
And how are we going to use this? Is this going to be this committee each doing our own evaluation through this matrix and then combining the scores, or the whole, and then presenting that presentation to the larger committee? Or are we going to do this to the whole committee and then combine those scores?
I think we do it to the whole committee. I think we're just test driving our weights here and our evaluation criteria. I think we'll have everyone complete this matrix, and then we can take these totals and average them out for the whole group, and that's
Okay.
it. And then that's gonna be the ranking, and then Mr. Jasper will give us the mill rates, and we're gonna have a nice graph.
But are we going to get this many projects to, is our goal to narrow it down to less projects, or is our goal to keep these?
It's a good point. This is a lot of projects to rank here.
Right, that's a lot. So do we use this matrix to narrow it down to 4 that we present to the entire committee, or some number, pick a number, 3 or 5, or how many different scenarios do we have here? We have 1, 2A, 2A, 3B.
Yeah, you've got about 10, I think.
Yeah, so, and that's way too many for the whole committee, I think.
Yeah, that will be very hard to rank. We need
you've got
4. I
12.
think it needs to be 1, 2, 3. Are the differences among the sub alternatives big enough to warrant them weigh them differently?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If I'm saying, are the differences between the sub options large enough to warrant them to weigh them differently? For example, are 2A and 2B close enough where they could just be categorized as one?
Yeah, I mean, Renee, the 2A is, the difference between the 2A and the 2B is one is the 6 to 8 middle school, the other is the 7 to 8 middle school. And then the sub, breakdown, if you look at it further, is one has CIP to all the, elementary schools, the other one has renovations to all the elementary schools. So that's, in a simple way, is
So as a committee, what if we each took these things home and did our homework, and we evaluated the 2As and the 2Bs, the 1 and the 2 and the 2A, or whatever the numbers are that are the similar projects, to narrow it down to one option. And then we can.
Yeah, I agree.
The process the second time to narrow it down even further. Is that?
I agree. Because we want people to just focus on 4 options and then all the criteria. I 100% agree with you on that, Sylvia.
And I believe, Arnett, I think Chuck had forwarded the PDFs of the presentation from the other night, which,
Yes.
breaks out those costs associated with, these 10 or 12 different scenarios here. So, that may be beneficial to, have the committee look at that, base some of their thinking or decision on that information. And then we come back and then eliminate or, narrow this down to, the four main topics or four main options and scenarios, and then have the graph or chart filled out accordingly from that.
Okay, I can forward that.
That would be good. Does that make sense to you, Andrew, or not?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because right now, I mean, having 12 options is a little bit.
Too much.
That is going to be a little bit much to try to differentiate between all of these.
Yeah.
I just make a comment on the way we're weighting these here is it's going to be very difficult if you're asking one person versus another without detail of what makes that a 90 for you versus maybe an 80 or something for somebody else. Like a 100-point scale where you're asking somebody to come up with a number is very subjective, where you're going to get some wide ranges in there. And if your idea was to just take everybody's grade on that and come back, you're not really using apples to apples between different people.
I'd like to add on to that. When I look at my rating of an 80 out of 95, I guess that seems high to me. And I would want to know, this is without knowing what the capital improvement projects would be at those elementary schools.
Yeah.
I think not knowing what the capital improvements are makes it difficult to weigh any of those.
Yeah, I would say I like the way that it's set up in total, but I think it's a little premature to try and rate all the options now. I think that's going to kind of come, but we need to further develop kind of like the scale of some of these weights that we have here and what that rating of, X in that row actually means.
In the description of factor, that's going to be a pretty significant step, I think, Chuck, in that direction. To once you can identify really what's going in those descriptors, that should help provide some framework. It's certainly not as good as the objective one that you had for the bridges, but it's a step toward that.
Yeah, I think the description of the factor, though, is really just telling you like what we mean by the category at the top, right? It's not really
Okay.
saying that you're
Right.
giving an 80 because it addresses this, and not this. It's really just a number
Yeah.
that we're kind of
But
picking out of there. That's all I'm saying.
Chuck, hit, based on the number of factors, it could be a scale up. So, if addresses enrollment projections, there was something there that was in terms of the descriptors, this is worth 10 points in the descriptor. This is worth 15 in the descriptor. This is, that's all. Like kind of like the bridge thing,
I think that the challenge is that.
Sorry.
No, I think that the challenge is that there are no discrete steps in any of these options. That when you look at what they are all subjective to who's looking at them. This traffic is the perfect example. For someone who lives right next to where a school is planned versus someone who lives next to an existing school, two ends of the spectrum. So I think that by virtue of sending it to the whole committee, actually you eliminate all that noise, and by the diversity of opinions, you perhaps converge towards an outcome that makes sense. If you were to have discrete rankings for each one of these, then there's no need to send it to the whole committee, right? Because those will be discrete and they will be quantifiable. But I think that's the challenge that we have here. We have a set of criteria that is non-quantifiable, and it's hard to put hard numbers to it. And this is when this method is useful for situations like that. But I mean, we can try to develop more discrete values for each one. I'm not sure where we're going to land though. That sounds like quite a bit of work.
Yep. You know, we have to continue on this path to fill out. We've already got a pretty good identification of what the real criteria are and how important the prioritization of each criteria. And that's a good start. And we also need to look at the 10 and kind of hone them down to something more manageable. And I appreciated the recommendation I think Sylvia had about, you know, let's take these home. You know, tomorrow we'll get the more robust description of factors, take these home, see if we can't narrow it down. At the same time, thinking about, you know, do we need to look at even a more objectified strategy or not? I understand what you're saying, Renee, though, about that comes out in the sauce when that many people are, and this is a large group, when that many people are rating them, it should come out.
I want to throw a suggestion on the table, just to make this maybe a little simpler. So at the top, you have 7 evaluation criteria. So, and the most important one is column B, addresses enrollment. So what if you make that a 7, 6, then modernize the schools, 5. So now you're just going from 7 down to 1, with 1 being the improvement of traffic patterns. And then over on the left, take your scenarios and assign for addresses enrollment projections a number from 1 through however many scenarios they are. So if you think that option 1 is the best solution on addressing enrollment, you'd give that a 10. And then, you know, rank. So in other words, you're ranking all of the scenarios against each criteria based on the number of scenarios you have. I'm just curious how what that would look like when you did it.
Sounds simpler a little bit, because then you have a little more control over what you're determining are your criteria, right? So I can vote on each of those individually. That sounds.
Like
Then you're going to have to multiply the, you know, addresses enrollment. If you've got a 7 and then you've got on the scenario 1, that gets a 10, then the value in there is 70. So you're going to have to add another column to figure that out, but it just may be a simpler way than, you know, picking a number from, you know, 1 to 100 or 1 to 95. It's just a thought.
Oh, that could make
Yeah,
sense.
I think the result in the total column comparatively should be the same.
Right. But you're forcing choices between each of the scenarios that way.
Right. You're not allowing 2 options to people to weigh 2 options the same.
Right.
Well, you're essentially ranking the scenarios and how they address the category up above.
Categories, right.
That's how you're doing.
But the number of factors, oh, I got you. You're going 1 through 7 on the category.
Yeah, I think any way we do it, you know, whatever is simpler for to understand. At the end of the day, if we got a total column here.
Yeah, I watched Marlene struggle with deciding what it is, and I was trying to think how I would assign it, same way. And I'm thinking, well, is it 80 or 85? I'd give that an 85. The next one is, I didn't think it was so important, but I liked some of the things in there is a little bit more important than the one prior to it. So how do I factor that into my total of 30 or whatever the number was? If I had each one of those individual descriptors underneath it ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I could say all right, I'm going to rank them in this order: 1, 5, 3, 2, whatever it is. That totals 8. 8 times 7 is whatever the
Right.
number that I would get. And then you just see which is the highest number. I don't know. How does that work? You can tell I'm
Do a
not,
dry run with the same scenario that you just had, just using that new scoring system, see what you come up with.
right, exactly. And I'm not good at math, so I don't know how that, because what if one has more criteria under it than another? So you've got one heading that is a heading, and there's 5 criteria, and the next heading has 7 criteria, and the next one only has 2 criteria.
Has 2, right?
How does that work when you add that all up? That's not really fair, is it? Or is it?
No, so what you would do, let's do a simple example. So, the most important criteria is addresses enrollment projection space requirements. So now look at the first 2 scenarios. A new elementary school, CIPs to the other elementaries, renovate high school, versus a new elementary school, renovate the elementaries, do a capital improvement plan for Dodd, and renovate the high school. So now your choices are 1 and 2. Which of those 2 is better gets a 2 to address enrollment projections.
Mhm.
Okay.
There you go.
You're saying, Ben?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Now, in this particular scenario,
Doesn't.
This is golf. You'd have to have a low score overall then, right?
yeah, I mean, both of those scenarios, I think, have the same impact on enrollment.
Enrollment.
But,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
I'm
that
just
would
saying, by
be
using
one
one and 2 versus like a 7 or something in this, you really want a low score at the end, right? Like 1 is actually the 100.
1 is good.
Well, it's the-
Yeah.
We could do it, we probably would want to do it, 2 is better, right? Because then you're going to multiply the 2 times the 7 to calculate the value of that assignment. But in the second category, physical need, condition needs, code requirements, that second scenario where you are at least doing capital improvements at Dodd and you're renovating all the elementaries, that gets a 2. And the first scenario, which you're not even touching Dodd, gets a 1. So now the value of that second scenario, 6 times 2 is 12.
Now you've lost me. That was algebra.
Well, you're taking these numbers and then you're multiplying them by this weighted, the weight A row number here, Sylvia.
I get it. It takes me a little
Okay,
while.
so actually, this technically becomes a 6 and this becomes a 12.
Right.
Correct.
And this is a 14 and that's a 14.
Right. So you'd want to, I mean, when we build
And
this
you're
out,
working
you
with-
need a column to show what your ranking is and then the value,
And it formulates.
right, for each of those. So the first step in doing this is you rank at all of them and then you do the math. This way you don't confuse people.
I like it.
Well, there's one person that likes it. Thanks, Mark.
Well, I see the value in ranking those things. I mean, I do. I'm just trying to get my head around how the math works, and I would leave the math part of it to the math whizzes here, because my old math teacher has long passed the pearly gates and probably new to me, right? But I like the idea of being able to rank the pieces that I have to use to make that decision. And however that happens, I like to be able to quantify the reasons I'm coming up with that ranking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, I think that works. So just the math needs to be worked out on the spreadsheet, but at the end of the
Right, I
day,
mean,
it should be the same thing.
Yeah, you essentially you take this box, you'd break it up so that you'd have your ranking 1 or 2, and then you'd have another column that would be a formula that would be taking that number and multiplying it
By the points.
up here.
Yeah, or you just
Right.
here on the total, you just say, let me see. Here on the total, you just say this times this plus this times this plus this times this plus this times this, right?
Right.
And then it will spit out a number here, and you know that number. Then it will be different for all of them. So I don't think you need another column. You just need to do that
If
formula.
you do it that way, that's
Yeah, I can do it that way.
the total,
Yep.
and it solves the need to make this more complicated when you look at it.
Okay, so John, I think on your court is to complete these descriptions, populate those formulas. In our court is to look at this option and see how we can distill them down to just 4.
Okay.
Makes sense.
You good, Andrew?
Yep.
Dean and Jeff, anything else you may want to add tonight?
This is great. I think we made really good progress.
Excellent.
So let me just quickly ask Renee, would we prefer to go with the 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 then? Is that preferable versus the 100 to the, down to the 10 as far as the weight?
Yeah, sounds like it was, right?
Yeah.
I'm indifferent. To me, I think they both accomplished the same purpose. I can see how the smaller numbers might be easier to
Easier to work with? Okay.
work with, yeah. So, I mean, Andrew and Sylvia, you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, so let's go with that.
Okay, we'll redo the whole graph there so it's sequential and,
Yeah.
numerically in order too. So that cleans that up.
So will you be sending that to us individually so we can work on it? So in preparation for our next meeting, we will have all that to work with?
I can. The other question I was going to ask is at what point are we going to have the committee narrow these down to, ultimately 4 scenarios? Do you want to do that first, or do you want me to send the chart with the, 10 to 12 listed there initially, and then we can tweak that later?
Wouldn't it make sense to actually use this scoring system to narrow it down?
Yeah.
There you go.
The only thing that, in terms of narrowing it down,
It'll be a good dry run anyway.
the only thing though is that I left that last meeting that Chuck presented this stuff thinking that, really any combination is on the table. And so, 10 is a lot. I wouldn't want to say that nobody could throw another combination on the table if they didn't feel like the ranking of that combination would be higher than what's here. You know what I mean? So, I mean, if we can consider that too within this small group, it might be worthwhile. I'm not saying that there is. I don't have that. I don't want to rule it out. If there's some combination that somebody in this group comes up with that you think scores out really high, I wouldn't want to stifle people because it's not part of these 10.
Yeah, but that's a good one because these also serves as a tool every time someone throws one out there, and if it doesn't make the threshold, then it gets immediately removed.
Right, you
And
dump
we
it.
don't. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, yeah.
I think if you look at it just
Unfortunately, I gotta run.
as 4 options, though, if you just take like the A of each of the options, which has the capital improvement stuff, and just rank those, because if you went to the B option and say we didn't like capital improvement projects for something, and you just went to the renovation, they're all increasing incrementally the same. So if you just do 4 options and you rank those out, it's like a logistics of which coming first. That's all you're
Yeah, I
ranking.
think we do that. We do the A's, and then if the 2 gets picked, then we pick within the 2 which one of the A, B, or C we do, and then we keep going down the 3 that way.
Exactly.
Got it.
Right. That makes sense.
Does that make sense, John?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want me to whittle down the list here and just leave
Yes.
these in, correct?
Yeah, just make it 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the
Okay.
option A is the predominant one.
Okay, now just not to make it more confusing, but there are a couple with the A's. Like 2A has 2 options. You know, again, the difference being the CIP versus the renovation of the elementary schools in this location here.
Yeah, I think anything that's a capital improvement versus renovate, just go with the capital improvement scenario for now and rank
CIPs?
that. You rank
Okay.
that, and because if you're going to renovate, like say we wanted to renovate afterwards, they're all increasing incrementally the same. Like if you're going from capital
Well,
improvement
not
on one to the
really,
other.
because if you have the life expectancy is purposely put in there to decrease it. But it will probably balance out. I see what you're saying, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, that life expectancy would be a factor on one and the other, so it's the rating would be the same on it. You know what I mean? Like your difference in your score is going to be the same.
right, the delta will be the same. I agree. Let's just whittle it down to 1 per each. So 1A, 1B, 1C with CIP.
Okay.
Just for the
We're gonna
purposes
have
of
to
ranking them and eliminating.
We're gonna have to, yeah, we're gonna have to explain that to the group. I think we're gonna have to explain that this is a multi-step process where you're gonna have some big categories, and then you're gonna have the smaller ones. So first, we're trying to pick these ones, right? 1, 2, etc., and then we'll get into the A's, B's, or C's. But this first exercise is to pick the big categories.
Right.
Okay. I would like to call a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Andrew, wake up. We're going home.
Second. I'm awake.
Now you look tired.
Well, thank you, everyone. It
All
was a
right.
productive day. Thank you so
Good
much.
night.
So we
Thank
meet
you.
All right.
next Wednesday, the same.